It's the Underdogs back with you. I'm Jordan Brenner. That's Peter Keating. And our show is brought to you by DraftKings. DraftKings, the crown is yours. Peter, how are you dealing with your first week without football?
You know what? Since I got re-immersed back into basketball, I'm dealing pretty well. And I want to say, I don't have this kind of bitter, cranky Super Bowl feelings. I thought, I watched the Super Bowl with an Eagles fan. Yes, that was part of it. But I thought the Super Bowl ended up the way that the season should have ended up. So I don't have this dissatisfaction a lot of football fans seem to have.
So a little bit later in the show, we're going to give some NBA at the All-Star break or about to be at the All-Star break thoughts. Peter's got an under of the week around baseball, which is pitchers and catchers coming soon.
Coming
But
right
first,
up.
Peter, let's dig into the Super Bowl a little bit more. I always told people when we were starting the show, right, that it's called the Underdogs, but it's really about why unlikely things happen in sports, right? Well, the outcome of that Super Bowl was certainly unlikely or unexpected, at least if you go by the betting lines and the general expectations that no matter what weaknesses you see in the Kansas City Chiefs, somehow Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid are going to override them. Peter, I think we were both questioning the Chiefs' offensive line and looking at the Eagles' offensive and defensive lines as a huge advantage, but nobody been able to use that advantage to crack this team to this point. Why did the floodgates open here?
One, um, the Eagles defensive line is just that good.
Mm-hmm.
Two, I think it's pretty significant that there was a 2-week delay before the Super Bowl because I think it gave the Eagles time to pick apart the weaknesses in what the Chiefs were doing to mask the holes in their offensive line. I mean, Joe Tooney's a good player. He's not equipped to do the job that they asked him to do, and they figured out how to exploit that fact. I think that made a big difference. And three, come on, Jordan. The Chiefs should have won about 10 games this year. We've been saying it for months that they were due for some kind of comeuppance. Now, did it come against Baltimore like I expected? No. Did it come against Buffalo like a lot of people? No. Did it come all at once in a big kind of snowfall or kind of a bucket of water over the door when they walked in the room? Yes, but come on. This team, this market was due for a correction. The correction came.
But part of me wants to agree with you, but it's
Jordan, you should agree with me. This team the Chiefs outscored their opponents by a big whopping, guess the number, 23 points this season. They're just not as good as they seemed, and it is a victory. Jordan, listen to me. If anyone out there is listening, listen to me. This is a victory for rationality and common sense that this team was not as good as it looked. They had an amazing run. Kurt Schilling was right. Aura and mystique should not be enough to expect a team to win a championship, and it wasn't. The better team won. It's a good thing.
but it just feels a little bit undeservedly self-congratulatory on our
It
part
sure
to be
does.
like,
Well, wait, what is undeservedly self-congratulatory mean? I don't understand. I don't understand that as a contradiction. So, I mean, you got to explain that to me.
I mean, if we keep saying since October that the Chiefs are overperforming and they keep winning games and then they finally lose one game, I don't
One
think that,
game, the biggest game by a
yes,
landslide.
but
The one where coaching and Mahomes were supposed to matter the most, and they didn't.
the part where we can agree is I think we did all say that the Eagles had the better roster, top to bottom. By the way, we were not alone in this, right?
Right. Right.
Um, and that if you're banking on the Chiefs, you were banking on Mahomes and Andy Reid. What I found really interesting is you could see the plays that Andy Reid had schemed up,
Mm-hmm.
and he's so good at just each week having a different wrinkle and a play that plays off the previous one. And you could see these misdirection plays should have been good. And the Eagles, the pressure came so quickly and so directly that they blew all that up, which really makes me feel, again, look, I've been saying as long as I've been alive that the way to build the team is on both lines. It's what I keep saying with the Giants as they rebuild. That's why don't want them to take a quarterback. But I digress. The point being that if you can control both lines of scrimmage, everything else falls into place. It's why the Lions, it's the underrated reason why the Lions were so good, and it's the underrated reason why the Lions fell apart at the end because they lost their defensive line. So
Yeah, and you could see what was interesting was you could see the attempts to integrate new plays and new players, and the early passes to DeAndre Hopkins and to Hollywood Brown were not successful because Mahomes wasn't allowed to be comfortable enough to make them, and the receivers didn't know exactly yet how to react. Now, that actually changed during the game. The Chiefs did adjust. It was way too late, but it was fascinating to me, and it kind of cool that Mahomes made that one beautiful throw, the 50-yard throw, to dropping it right into Xavier Worthy, who had, by the way, we called him having a good game. Let's congratulate ourselves for that.
Wow.
Dropped it right in his gut from 50 yards away, but it was too little, too late because of what you're talking about, the pressure.
What does this game tell us, if anything, as we look at futures and teams that could possibly win the Super Bowl next year?
Well, first of all, I was wondering if teams are going to use this as any kind of blueprint for bottling up Saquon and challenging the Eagles' running game. I don't think the Eagles are going to be able to run the ball 59% of the time next year. And I think, Saquon's more likely to have like a 1,400-yard year than a 1,900-yard next year. And how the kind of small but important elements of what the Chiefs did right might affect Philadelphia next year is interesting. But I think what you said, when bringing up the Lions, I think I really like the Lions as a Super Bowl contender next year because they're the team built the biggest and roughest on both sides of the line. If you're going to take away what the Eagles did right, the Lions are already doing it right and undermined essentially only by horrible injury luck, right? And so I like the Lions coming out of this as a key takeaway.
Well, at DraftKings, the crown is yours. The Lions have the fifth most likely odds to win the Super Bowl.
I try to stay out of the top 2 or 3 since last year, Jordan. I always used to pick favorites when you asked me for underdogs. Do the Lions count as enough of an underdog pick for you?
No, but I think I don't think we're picking underdogs right now. I think anyone you get right now is good value. So the Eagles are plus 600, Chiefs plus 700, Bills and Ravens plus 700, Lions plus 900. I think drawing lessons. One is bet on talent. Look, I think if you were not looking at the Eagles at this point, it was because they finished last season so poorly, and then that offensive and defensive line talent was there. Everyone talks about the Barkley addition, but the biggest addition was completely remaking their secondary and having corners who could shut people down after getting absolutely annihilated in the secondary last year. So the other piece of this is you can improve a position group very significantly in an offseason with 1 or 2 draft picks and 1 or 2 free agent signings. I read a really interesting article on the Action Network making the case for the 49ers for the same reason. They had tons of poor injury luck. Obviously, that team is super talented. What I'm worried about is I think it's harder to remake the offensive line in an offseason, and they have sort of holes in multiple places. Plus, they got to trade Debo. Look, I think the Lions' time is coming, but if I'm gonna go for a longer shot, I think the Packers at plus 1,800 are really interesting. There's a lot of pieces there. We talked about how analytically they were better than their record this season. So they're a team to watch, especially if they can upgrade a couple areas of weakness. I think the Bengals at plus 1,800. We know Joe Burrow can win big games, and he was doing everything this year with one of the worst defenses in football. You've got to think they're going to patch up some holes next year. So those are sort of my 2 early teams I'm keeping an eye on.
Do you think there's a lesson here also that if you do build up enough talent on both sides of the line and you're foundationally strong, that also allows you to take intelligent gambles? Like, the Eagles spent their top 2 picks on defensive backs, and it worked because that was a hole rather than being weak everywhere. And I keep thinking about the Eagles trading up to get Devontae Smith. I keep thinking about the Eagles drafting Jalen Carter when he was a consensus top 5 pick and get to them at number 13 because he had been arrested. Once you have a strong enough foundation, you can take intelligent gambles to fill particular holes. And those are the organizations that I let. That's another thing we should applaud about the Eagles. All these Giants fans who are so bitter about the Eagles. Well, you mean the Giants ended up with freaking Kadarius Toney when they traded down after the Eagles got Devontae Smith. The Giants didn't draft Jalen Carter. I mean, you got to applaud at a certain point the intelligent gambles to fill particular holes once you're foundationally strong.
Sure. And I'll leave it with this thought. the biggest gamble or decision, or a lot of teams are going to have to make, starting with the team that currently controls him, the Cleveland Browns, is what happens with Myles Garrett, because
Mm-hmm.
he is a game wrecker. He is a game changer. And if you throw him onto a defensive line like the Lions, for instance, or the Commanders, that could shift the odds. But we will talk more about that.
Oh, good Lord. I
Around,
hadn't even thought about him on the Commanders. That
yeah,
would make the division very
right.
interesting.
We will talk more about that as free agency and the trade market heats up. And we will be right back after this. We're back, and it's time for Under of the Week, brought to you by DraftKings. DraftKings, the crown is yours. And Peter, why don't you get us a little fired up for baseball with a quick future bet we might be able to make?
Jordan, I know it feels a little early for baseball. There's still free agents out there. Pitchers and catchers haven't even reported yet. But look, let me tell you something. There's one team out there that stands out like a sore thumb when it comes to the over-unders. One team in all of MLB won more games than it lost last year, despite allowing more runs than they scored. That was the St. Louis Cardinals. They won 83 games. Their over-under for this year, little regression baked in already, is 77.5, but they're going to regress by a lot more than that. This is a team that was lucky on offense, 10th in baseball in batting average on balls in play. They were not particularly lucky in their pitching staff. Like Sonny Gray should have had an even better record last year and is kind of due to have some luck rebound, but they're not a good defensive team. It wasn't all bad luck. You put it together, they should be somewhere in the low 70s. And I'll tell you this, Chicago, the Cubs, who I liked last year, the Reds, who we both liked last year, were both unlucky last year. Pittsburgh is improving. Milwaukee's always good. This is a team looking ahead for last place. Look, St. Louis says it's rebuilding. They're ripping the team apart. And what talent have they developed? You remember Nolan Gorman? Nolan Gorman, power hitting second baseman. Jordan, he hit 203 with 150 strikeouts last year. What happened to Jordan Walker? Light tower power, shuttled back and forth between the majors and minors, between third base and the outfield. They've mismanaged the young talent. They have some young talent. They have good executives. It's going to take a couple of years to show up. And they might still get rid of Nolan Arenado. So I'm looking for a nice, fat, last place landing for the St. Louis Cardinals. Give me under 77.5 next year.
I feel like I bet they're under at midseason last year and missed by a game, so I'm scarred. But I like everything you say makes sense. They just they're kind of like Rasputin, like they never will fully die. But I'm with you, like that at least based on talent and projections, this shouldn't be a very good team.
I couldn't agree more.
Yes. Well, let's see if we agree when we move to the NBA. We've been so wrapped up in football that we haven't even been able to digest just a absolutely insane NBA trade deadline.
Crazy.
We haven't been able to look ahead to teams that might challenge for a title. It's been kind of a weird season so far, and I feel like it's time to take stock of it. So look, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the Luka trade. Again, why unexpected things happen in sports. This was certainly unexpected. So while neither team may be an underdog, it's certainly an underdog move that this even happened. Peter, start with you. What was your reaction to this trade going down?
My first reaction was I want to skip ahead 5 or 8 years to whoever's writing the tell-all books or stories about what the hell got the Dallas executives so upset about Luka and so irrevocably upset that they decided they wanted to put the guy's 25. The guy was great last year. He is great. I mean, if my conditioning were as bad as his, would you throw me off the show, Jordan? I mean, can that really be what we're talking about? What the hell happened? Now, having said that, I want to point something out. Without Luka, the Dallas is 10-7. With 118 points scored a game. Kyrie's having another fantastic year. Kyrie Irving has settled in to become like a leader that I never thought he was going to be and playing at a level I really didn't think he was going to be able to sustain. I'm not counting them out for playing better this year and maybe playing better in the playoffs this year, maybe even playing better next year. Having said that, do you understand this as a long-term deal?
No. Even if you accept a lot of what Dallas is selling, and by the way, there was a lot of early words. Well, they were worried he wouldn't resign. All the reporting since then.
Who did he insult at the team Christmas party?
all the reporting since then indicates that he would have re-signed. I
Right,
just
right.
think they're spinning this. The we got to keep it quiet. We don't want a disgruntled player. It had to be stealth. I'm I can't take the spin anymore. There are two indisputable facts in this whole trade. One, Luka Doncic is 25 years old and
Right.
Anthony Davis is 31, 32. Two, they didn't make him available to any other team, thereby limiting what they can get. And neither is good business. Even if Nico Harrison coveted Anthony Davis in a way that is almost unhealthy, you are doing your team a disservice by not engaging with the trade market. Don't give me the whole, if it leaked, it would have been a circus and Luka would have been upset. You have to go out and get the best deal possible. And sorry, I do not think Anthony Davis and little else is the best deal they could have
But Jordan,
gotten.
why did they have to? Serious question from me to you. Why did they have to get a deal at all? They rebuilt that team around Luka and Kyrie without sacrificing huge number of assets last year into a conference
I
championship
agree,
team.
but I sometimes give teams the benefit of the doubt. When they move a player, they're generally the one who knows him best. So if there was some sort of true reason why they didn't think they could win with this guy, or they just, saw him falling off a cliff, something like that, then sure, do your due diligence and find a move. But I cannot justify the spin. It's too much. Great move by the Lakers. You've got a franchise cornerstone. Yeah, maybe he'll be fat for the rest of his years. Maybe he's gonna at 31 fall apart, but he's 25. You have to bank on this talent.
Yeah, and you know who else I think knows talent as well as the teams that have the players is LeBron. LeBron's been around for a long time. LeBron's been around a lot of players and a lot of teams. And if there were questions like that about the guy who's going to be his running mate, he would have quashed this in a second, don't you think?
Well, supposedly he didn't know, depending on what you believe. By the way, can we talk about LeBron for a second? Because he's 40, okay? And he is averaging
Yes.
24.4 points per game,
Yeah.
9 assists, 7.8 rebounds. He's shooting 38% from three. This is crazy.
Yeah.
This is maybe the hardest sport to play at an older air quotes age. And this guy's I don't have any words left. If you spend your life trying to poke holes in LeBron James, you have a sad existence, because this is everything about what he's doing at this age and the level he's competing at is phenomenal. Now, can he take this team to another championship, even with Luka, even with a 32-19 record? No, I don't think so. I think their defense is going to take a hit. I think the Mark Williams trade falling apart, which, by the way, the Hornets are now challenging the failed physical, so this is going to be a whole drama.
That's a whole funny story in itself.
Right.
I've rarely, I don't think I ever seen a team rescind a trade like that after
Yeah,
talking
I
it
don't
up
think
so
they'll be
much.
able to get enough stops in big games, but
Yeah.
Peter, this does lead to another thing I want to discuss, which is sort of which team on the periphery right now of the standings, either sort of out of the playoffs, looking to play their way into the playoffs, or like low playoff team, but potentially could rise up to maybe be a conference championship contender. Who's got your underdog gaze right now?
All right, look, it's hard to call them underdogs. This might sound like an old hackneyed pick, but look, before the trade deadline, the Warriors were 28th in free throw rate. They were 25th in points in the paint. They were having trouble. You could see it early in the year. Within a week of the season starting, Steve Kerr had to answer questions about why they were literally losing games because he wouldn't put Steph Curry back in early enough in the game. They were having trouble scoring, having a secondary ball handlers and scoring with Curry out of the game. I think they took a big step to solving all of these problems by acquiring Jimmy Butler. Now, look, next year, year from now, $100,000 billion tied up in 1, 2, or 3 players, it's going to be a problem. Maybe he starts fighting with Draymond Green, whatever. But Butler's been good on his best behavior early in his tenure with teams, and he can do exactly what they need. And if there's any team that is hoarding or reserving energy for a playoff push and a playoff run, and who knows how to get it done toward the end of the season, it's this Warriors team. They know they're packing it in for one last run. I love their chances, not just to get into the play-in, but to get like maybe top 8 or 6. I think they're gonna start ripping off wins. Look, in Butler's first 2 games, um, he's gotten to the free throw line something like 20 times, and he's shooting really well from inside already. He's already giving them exactly what they needed. They didn't have to give up Kuminga or Pajemski. I love that move. Okay, Durant didn't want to go back to Golden State. Okay, he didn't want to go back to Golden State. You can't compare it to that. You got to compare it to what they had been doing, and what they're going to do now is going to be a lot better than what they had been doing.
I understand the logic there. I still think this team has a lot of glaring holes. They don't have as much shooting as we're used to from this team. They don't have much in the way of rim protection. Injuries continue to be a problem, and I'm just not sure how Kuminga, Draymond, and Jimmy Butler. I don't think they can play the three of them at once particularly effectively. That's really compromising their shooting. So I got to see more. One team that kind of caught my eye and I didn't expect them to is Minnesota.
Mm.
They're sitting at 7th in the West right now, 30 and 24, but they actually have the worst luck in the league.
Mm-hmm.
They're 8th in net point differential. Their expected win total should be a little over 33 right now. I don't think this team is playing as well as they can or as they did last year. I see a push coming. Obviously, Julius Randle's healthy right now.
Right.
Julius Randle is not healthy right now, but this team has a lot of weapons still. I think, Anthony Edwards has shown that he can be a big game player. I would just keep an eye, if I'm looking in the loaded West for one team that's sort of outside of the top 4 that could make a conference final run, I still think Minnesota has those weapons, especially with Dallas. I think taking a step back. I'm not sure that I can count on the Clippers. Kawhi is always an injury waiting to happen. James Harden. Yeah, I'm intrigued by what Minnesota can
There's
do.
a big difference too in the numbers that Minnesota's put up with and without Randle. And if Randle's going to get healthy, they're going to look a lot better than they've looked the last couple of weeks. Are we counting Houston as a fringe contender? They're plus 6,000, 13th on the list of odds to win a championship, but they're 6th in net rating. I know they're racked by injuries right now, but geez, Jordan, young, talent. Can I get an amen? Amen Thompson does everything. I was enthralled watching him play. He's used these injuries to get into the starting lineup. He does everything great off the ball. He can't shoot threes, but okay, whatever. He's really young, but he's an electric athlete. And our old friend Fred VanVleet, once again bringing his winning ways to another team. He's hurt now too. There's a couple of guys
and
who are hurt.
hurt now.
Sengun's hurt, and Steven Adams is hurt, but they're all supposed to be getting
Jabari
cleared.
Smith.
They're all supposedly getting cleared to play again pretty soon. Before they lost 6 out of 7, they won 10 out of 13 in January. Thompson went wild, triple doubles.
It's a fun team, Peter. I just the question is going to be when they consolidate this young talent right now. Too many people, not enough time. I don't think this is the year they win. There are too many teams better than them, but they certainly have a bright future. And you know what else has a bright future, Peter?
They're plus 6,000.
This show, because next week, that's right, I will be gone. Peter will be flying solo. Maybe a guest, maybe not. Who knows what he has planned? Tune in to see what happens next week when Peter doesn't have me checking up on him. This show could go 77 minutes long. All hell could break loose. Who knows? Peter, give us a tease quick of what's to come, and then we'll wrap.
There'll be props. There'll be bad jokes. There's going to be a lot more Sarah McCrory. It's what the fans have been demanding.
All right. Well, on that note, good luck next week. I'll see you in 2 weeks. Happy post-football world, everybody.